Welcome back. This review is on A Complete Unknown, which is a biopic about the discovery and the rise of singer-songwriter icon Bob Dylan. This movie is directed and partially written by James Mangold and starring Timothée Chalamet, Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro, and Edward Norton. This movie opens up being set in the early 1960s when Bob Dylan was just about 19, 20 years old, and he's in New York City, and he is very much the struggling, starving artist, musician, and he's trying to make a name for himself and wants to write music. And he's performing, and he's just making the rounds, hitting the street, hitchhiking, trying to get his name out there. I was born in 1989, so I very much missed his early days and when he was becoming famous, but I did not grow up being exposed to his music. One of my first exposure to his song was The Times Are Changin', which was in the intro of the Watchmen movie. That was really my first exposure to Bob Dylan's music. I really did not know that he wrote a lot of the other songs that I had heard, or that he was the original writer behind a lot of the songs, and so much of the iconic music that he has been famous and so lauded for. So that being said, I was really coming in pretty cold and wanted this to just be a new experience. I was really excited to see some of the actors, and particularly how Timothée Chalamet was going to handle this legend, this musical icon. I was not disappointed, to say the least. This movie was a very intimate kind of experience for me. We had the whole theater to ourselves right in the middle. And honestly, for a movie like this that was a biopic about such an iconic music legend, it was a really special experience. Timothée Chalamet threw himself into this character. I just was like, I'm watching Bob Dylan. This is Bob Dylan. And anyone who has never seen him, I didn't even really know what Bob Dylan had looked like. I don't even remember ever seeing pictures of him, but you know the sound, you know, that kind of iconic, unique sound. He was incredible. I've always been very impressed with Timothée Chalamet and just seeing his massive range and just kind of the dramatic power that he has. I think he is one of, if not the top young artist in Hollywood. And I think he deserves everything that he's been getting. All of his performances that I've seen him in Dune, it's just absolutely incredible. And I know that he took this character really seriously and wanted to do it justice, which I think he definitely did. Moving on, all of the supporting actors were really strong also. Edward Norton, always incredible. He plays Pete Seeger. This is another character I knew very, very little about. And you really see how folk music was the backbone of a lot of these characters and the initial way that they met in their relationship. A big plot of the movie is not just kind of showing the relationship between Bob Dylan and the love triangle he had, being from Sylvie Russo and Joan Baez, and kind of that whole relationship with Joan is another singer, and she was doing covers of songs that Bob Dylan actually wrote in his earlier career when he was really just doing covers, and he wanted to get out and sing and perform his own music that he wrote himself, which is definitely what helped him take off and just put him into the stratosphere. And you see that in this movie. You see the beginning, the middle, and the end, and even the initial controversy of how it was very much a kind of questionable thing for him to be getting more into rock style performances and writing, and kind of airing from the pure folk style of writing and singing. And I found myself really immersed and getting lost in this movie. Not being someone that is by any means knowledgeable on a lot of classical vintage music, rock, or definitely folk, I really was immersed with this movie. I didn't think there was a single part in the movie that was slow. I thought it was paced very, very well, from the ups and the downs with his relationship with his girlfriend slash ex-girlfriend and what's going on with that. Elle Fanning did a great job kind of showing the girl who is normal, not famous, and how she would kind of handle someone who was her boyfriend who's just becoming more and more famous. So I thought her performance was great. You really feel the performance and the power behind the music and the writing that Bob Dylan was so good at. You know, they say at the end of the movie, I was not aware of this, he is the only performer to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize for literature because his writing was just regarded as something completely new and so transformative. And you really see that. Talking about things with the Cold War, political climates, racism still very much being a thing in the US and the industry, obviously, at the time. And you really kind of see that was something that was so important to what he wanted his music to be about. He wanted to have that social commentary, and he wanted stuff that was going to impact people, and it was going to be the truth, and oftentimes the ugly truth that people needed to see and hear, to be reminded of the state of the world, and that people can change, and a lot of times they need to change. And that really comes through with the performances and just the different things you see in this movie from start to finish. So I really enjoyed learning about Bob Dylan and just what his early days looked like. Rise to fame in New York City, what that looked like. His kind of transformation from pure folk music into more of a rock style of performance, and from being a solo act into being, in a band. And I really like seeing that. It even shows a Newport Music Festival. It was very much supposed to only be a folk show. That's a big part in the movie and the climax. And he was kind of going out there and he's like, look, if I'm going to do this, I'm doing it my way. And it might be hard for some people to swallow this pill, but I think they're going to like it. And I think once they can come around and rip that Band-Aid off, people are going to like this music. And he was not wrong. The rest is history. In a lot of ways, from not knowing much about Bob Dylan and what made him so iconic, he was like a white Bob Marley. And he wanted to have this music from the roots of folk transform people. Timothée Chalamet's performance as Bob Dylan being a white guy in America and talking about the political climate, talking about US going to war. And you really kind of see that his character is grounded in this moral, ethical stance. And that really shows you a lot about what was going on in his life and what he was not willing to compromise on. And I thought that was handled really well in the film. I was watching some interviews and press tours, Timothée Chalamet really talking about how he has always been such a huge fan of Bob Dylan, and he wanted to do it right. The way that he learned singing and guitar and just kind of wanted to get the sound down. Very much see him easily getting nominations, likely getting awards this movie, and just the way that it was done. I think you can go in not needing to know anything. You can go in whether you're a fan of Bob Dylan, whether you've heard of him or you know nothing. And I think you can be really moved by this movie and appreciate it for what it is. And he talks about that. He talked about how he really just wants nothing else but for people in younger generations to come into this movie and get put on to Bob Dylan in his music. And I think that's awesome. I was absolutely blown away by this movie. I think it's incredible. Audiences and critics are really liking it. It's very solid. All of the performances are great. The music in it is also awesome. And I found myself really enjoying it and learning more about Bob Dylan. That's going to do it for today. Have you seen this movie? What did you think about it? Stay tuned for more. Thanks.